So my understanding is the administration has prepared a brief presentation at the beginning. So we'll start with that. At that point, when that's done, we'll open it up for public comment. We're going to ask that everyone keep their comments at 2 minutes each. If you'd like to speak, please put your name in the chat function, and then we'll go in order of the people that request to speak. So I'll turn it over to the administration.
Great. Thank you so much, counselors, and thank you for this opportunity. So let me make sure I can do this correctly. Go. Okay, everybody seeing that? Okay. Take silence as a yes. So this is just a very brief overview of the Services and Neighborhood Support Agreement with Syracuse University. So I promise to move through these quickly. There we go. Okay, so here's a quick agenda. So I'm just going to give a quick overview, kind of some of the background of how we got here, the timeline for our review and outreach since we introduced this agreement to the council in October. And then Commissioner Collins and Commissioner Lefebvre will just very quickly walk through some of the provisions in the services agreement. Again, very high level, so that we want to make sure we leave enough time for questions and comments from counselors or anybody else that would like to make them. So just real quick, how did we get here? So the University Neighborhood Service Agreement Advisory Committee, also referred to endearingly as Unsac. So this was established in 1993 between the city and SU. It was a 20-year agreement, and I know oftentimes this gets kind of mixed up with the street closures. So initially, Syracuse University was leasing the streets from the city, but in the mid 90s or in the early 90s, they actually paid the city for the streets. So the streets are paid for. Syracuse University doesn't owe the city any more money for the streets that were closed. But out of those conversations came discussions about the impact of the university on the surrounding neighborhood, because obviously, the challenges for the university neighborhood are unique. Certainly not more or less important than any other challenges in neighborhoods, but they are unique to the university neighborhood. So the city and the university came to an agreement to create Unsac. And so, again, established in 1993, it was a 20-year agreement to really just address the impact of the university on the neighborhood. Things like supporting neighborhood organizations, fire and police. The Unsac committee is made up of a group of organizations within the neighborhood. There's some city representation. I believe there's some SU representation. They make the funding recommendations, and they submit those to the mayor and the council for their approval. So the decisions of how the Unsac money is spent is made in those committees, and those recommendations are submitted to the mayor and the council for their approval. And as many of you know, past recipients for the Unsac funding include the Westcott Community Center, University Neighborhood Preservation Association, UMPA, Thornton Park Association, and then also historically, it has also helped to fund additional patrols in the university neighborhood by the Syracuse Police Department. So in 2011, Unsac, 20 years from 1993, Unsac was set to expire in 2013. And so Mayor Minor, with the support of the council, negotiated a 5-year voluntary agreement with Syracuse University to extend Unsac beyond the date by which it was going to expire, and included in that agreement a $500,000 annual contribution to the city. And so that was really the beginning of Unsac and a service agreement being tied together. So I know there's been some questions about, why these things are tied together, and the current service agreement as proposed, 2011 is really when that tying together occurred. So Unsac was extended, and this annual contribution to the city, which the city could spend in whichever way it felt appropriate. It's a 5-year agreement. 2016, Mayor Minor negotiates a second 5-year voluntary agreement with SU, which increases the Unsac amount to $500,000 and gradually increases the amount that SU provides to the city each year until it will reach $1 million. The agreement also provides maintenance support to Walnut Park. And just to try and make the point that this isn't a totally brand new conversation, in the April 2016 press release released by both the city and the university, it does mention that the city and the university agree to have an ongoing conversation about other university area parks that could benefit from university provided maintenance. So, I certainly don't anticipate that people can remember the April 7th press release off the top of their heads, but that's really just to kind of demonstrate that these have been ongoing conversations for some time. So obviously with the 5 years coming up in 2021, the city and the university engaged in negotiations for a new services agreement. So just a timeline. I know some have been questions about, feeling as if this process has been rushed or we haven't communicated. So I wanted to provide just a timeline of how this proposed agreement has gone through. It was first introduced to the council, a draft of it on early October. The administration, specifically me, also sent emails to the Rose Society, Thornton Park Association, the football team, all the stakeholders involved in Thornton Park that we were aware of. We sent them an email saying, hey, we've come to this agreement. Here's an overview. What questions or concerns do you have? Mayor Walsh, Commissioner LaFave, Commissioner Collins they were invited and attended a Thornton Park Association meeting in October. The Finance Committee held a public meeting in October so that to allow for neighbors and the public to provide their concerns. And at that time, the Thornton Park Association provided the council and the city with a letter outlining their specific concerns and suggested changes. Commissioner Collins attends the Eastside TNT meeting in November. The city after going back to the table with SU, getting all the feedback that we got, went back to the table with SU, addressed many of the concerns that Thornton Park Association and others had identified, and incorporated these changes. And I won't read them all, but there were things, sidewalks along Ostrom and the length of time that Commissioner of Parks had to approve. There are changes that were made to incorporate concerns that we received from both the Thornton Park Association, counselors, and the public at large. So there have been a number of concessions and changes that have been made from the original agreement. This revised agreement incorporating that change is submitted to the council. And the council understandably wanted to reintroduce it with the new council, so it was withdrawn for more time for review. January, we received revisions from the Finance Committee, and this was really specific to, the unreasonably withheld or delayed, that language. So we've removed that language, and Commissioner Collins attends another Thornton Park Association meeting to share those changes with the membership. Thornton Park gives us a response saying they appreciate the revisions. They have some remaining concerns. They do make the point, though, that they don't want to delay this process any further. And then the agreement is held at the study session January 10th to allow more time to review. So I just want to, I know there's been a lot of skepticism about why does SU want this agreement? And I understand people being skeptical that somehow SU just wants to do this out of the kindness of their heart. And I know there's a lot of mistrust. I know there's a lot of history. For those that don't know, I worked for 2 or 3 years at Syracuse University in community relations, and all of my time was spent in town gown relations. And so I dished out chili at the Thornton Park Association. I attended their meetings, the Westcott East, which is now Westcott Neighborhood Association meetings, Outer Comstock meetings, Eastside TNT meetings every month. Heard the concerns about SU, and I lived and breathed this for a number of years. So I know very well the history and mistrust that exists between some of the neighbors and SU. But, why does SU want this agreement? I think it's, I have a neighbor who does beautiful landscaping. She does terrific flowers. I find no fault in any of her landscaping. But sometimes she leaves her trash cans out a couple of days beyond when trash, for a couple extra days, or she might not shovel her walk after a couple of days. Doesn't diminish all the work that she does in the landscaping, but I can bring her trash cans back or shovel her walk while I'm shoveling mine because I have the resources to do it. I have the time and energy to provide that. Now, do I do it because I'm a nice person and I want to do something nice? Sure, but there's also an element of self-interest because as a property owner, I have a stake in the properties that are adjoining my property. And so it doesn't diminish all the talent and hard work that she puts into her landscaping, but sometimes she needs some help. I do it to be nice, but also out of a little self-interest. So, I'm certainly not here to speak on behalf of Syracuse University, but given my background dealing with the town gown relations, that's really my take on why SU wants to do this. They have the resources and want to provide them, but also Thornton Park they're an adjoining property owner. And so, the more maintenance they can provide, it reflects also on their property, not to diminish anything that the Thornton Park Association or anybody has done in that park. But this, you know, the two more points. One is this is a 5-year agreement. So this is not going to continue in perpetuity. This is a 5-year agreement. And so I know there are concerns about, you know, precedents or this outliving this current administration. It's a 5-year agreement. So there is an end date to it, at which point we can evaluate, you know, what worked and what concerns remain from the length of this agreement. And then also just finally, you know, before I turn it over to Michael, we are at the point now where we're asking the council to support the agreement as it is, with all the edits that have been made during our conversations the last 4 months. So, you know, our intent here today is to provide some context, provide the details about the outreach that we've had, and, you know, answer whatever questions we can about the agreement as is. But I just wanted to make that point also, that the intent here is to answer questions and concerns, but, you know, we are really, the agreement is being put forth as is. Okay, I'm done, and now I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Corey. So councilors and other attendees, we're going to go over next broadly the two components. The first slide that we're looking at right here has to do with the shared services, and then after that we'll get into the hard cash as it is. So the bullets right here are certainly not all inclusive. These are the ones that have come up throughout the conversation repeatedly, so we thought we'd touch on these. Walnut Park, again, in the previous agreement, there's been the question of, hey, you know, has SU taken over Walnut Park? In a lot of questions around that. One of the great things about the parks within this city, and Commissioner Lefebvre can speak to it obviously far better than any of us, is the fact that the parks really are built for the neighbors of those parks. Walnut Park is in an area that is historic and has been deemed historic because for over 100 years it has been surrounded by sororities, fraternities, and other university-affiliated properties. And so the whole concept here is that that's a park that serves who's next to it, and it's frankly the university's ability to pay attention to it has improved the maintenance, has improved the appearance, and the general upkeep of that. Thornton Park, there's you know, certainly we've all heard the concerns around what SU's additional assistance there that we're looking forward to could mean. And so we want to be really, really clear about a few things. One, there is no enhanced access to the park for Syracuse University or university affiliated people. Just none whatsoever. Two, alienation has never been part of the discussion at all in any way, shape, or form. In the same way it never had been with Walnut. And three, there will be no work done without approval from the city. You know, what we're talking about is basic maintenance, but again, that's going to be that is the work that needs the approval from the commissioner or other, and for anything else, it may need approval of the arborist, of other groups, but there is no ability for Syracuse University to do any work above and beyond an approval process that that doesn't exist anywhere else. Community policing. So the Unsac agreement has provided overtime funds to be able to for the Syracuse police to be able to make sure that officers that wanted some overtime duty and were willing to do patrolling within the areas around the university, that's available to them. And what that's meant is increased patrols within the university area. That's unchanged in this agreement because Unsac is unchanged in this agreement. The university has asked for additional support from Syracuse University. We have been working with them in a way that recognizes what our own limitations are from a staffing level. And Department of Public Safety and our police force came together and came up with something that both felt worked really, really well to address those needs. And that's what you see in the agreement with the CSOs that would be at Shine. And then lastly, crosswalks. The idea of safe access to the park is important. We've got 2 crosswalks that are in need of upgrades. University recognizes that. The city recognizes that. We have stated that we know that it needs to happen regardless. That is recognized within the agreement, that that'll happen within the 5-year period of the agreement. So that's really what we see right there. So moving on to the next slide, when we take a look at funding, what we're going to, and I know Corey's looking for the button. There we go. Thanks, Corey. So there's 2 sections that spell out the funding. The Unsac section is on top of page 4 within the agreement. It's number 3, financial support for city neighborhoods. This is where we see the $500,000 annual payment for a total of $2.5 million. That's the $125,000 for the police and $375,000 that is allocated, as Corey discussed, to neighborhood organizations through that application process. And we've got the participation of the district counselors in that allocation process. And then the second is what's outlined within Exhibit B and referenced within the agreement at the bottom of page 3, financial support for city services. And this is where the increase right away in year 1 from what has been last year was $1 million payment up to the 1.25, and you see those increases through year 4, so that year 4 and 5 total out of $2 million together over that 5-year period. We're at $8.5 million. So between the 2.5 for Unsac and the 8.5,
I'm realizing my math is wrong. That should total increase over current is 3.5 million. Math was never my strong point.
The total increase. And Corey, I was paying attention to the totals. Okay, so good.
I was an English major. What can I say?
Can I ask a quick question, Michael? You just said page 3. I'm having a hard time finding what you're referencing. Can you point that out a little more specifically?
Yeah, sure. If you're looking at page 3 where it says financial support for city services, and that says university shall make annual payments to the city according to schedule set forth in Exhibit B. And Exhibit B was in the attachments that Corey and I sent around on Wednesday. And that's what's outlined in the service fee, the service fee payment that you see year 1 through 5 on this slide. That is from Exhibit B.
Okay. Okay, so this doesn't address the 11 million total, Exhibit B.
No, no. Exhibit B is specific to the support for city services outlined in number 2 at the bottom of page 3. The Unsac, that 500,000, that 2.5 above it, that is the following page. That's the financial support for city neighborhoods on the top of page 4.
Okay, so Exhibit B only shows 8.5 million. I'm still not seeing a total exhibit for this slide that you're presenting, including both.
Correct, because Exhibit B is specific for number 2, financial support for city services, because it is an escalating amount, where the support for city neighborhoods is a flat amount per year, so that didn't need to be broken out into a separate exhibit. So that's why it's outlined wholly within number 3, financial support for city neighborhoods.
Thanks for that. It's very unclear otherwise without your explanation and reading Syracuse.com. Okay, thanks. Sure,
happy to do it. So that's the cash part of what we're talking about right there. And that's really, you know, we wanted to make sure that we've got enough time to go through questions and everything. So that's what we wanted to present to the council. So we're happy to stop talking and start answering questions.
Yes, I have one question. It's kind of, the things sound great. You know, I get, you know, what they're trying to do here and, you know, how we can work together in this instance. However, who from SU is making the contact with everybody? Because I would like to also, you know, to hear from those people, prospective people from SU. Because, you know, everything that through the agreement has been presented on our side, from the city side, from the commissioner's side, and I haven't heard nothing from them.
Well, so Councilor Gathers, at the top level, it's been the mayor and the chancellor. that this is absolutely at the very top level, something that the chancellor and the mayor have agreed on. Both sides have. So the mayor has tasked myself and Chief Administrative Officer Frank Kaliva with it on our side. Obviously, we've heavily involved Corporation Counsel along the way, and then they've utilized Corporation Counsel and Sydney Johnson, who's their intergovernmental and neighborhood relations person.
Amir, I have Sydney's contact information I got yesterday from Counselor Driscoll, so I'm happy to share that with you if you want to call her yourself. It seems like you have questions.
Yes, I would love that.
Great, I'll send you that.
Good morning, everyone. Mike, I have a question just to clarify, and not sure if this goes to you, but when it comes to the parks, and I know our community has a lot of reserves when it comes down to this, the relationship with SU and the city, the community, right? The constituents are really concerned about this. When it comes down to Thornton Park and getting permits, how is that, and I don't know if that's a Julie question, is that how are we going to make sure that Thornton, the SU do not take over, all of the time for Thornton Park? So if people wanted to utilize the park and, they're getting all these permits in before time, how do we make sure that the community is still able to use the park just as much as, the students at the university?
So I can speak to that, Councilor Caldwell. So when it speaks about permits in this is permits for the maintenance, if they do any weeding or any type maintenance around the park. So those types of permits would not have anything to do with any community-based permits, nonprofits, Shakespeare in the Park or anything like that. But as a whole, not just speaking for Thornton Park Association, Thornton Park, I can just say collectively as a whole across all of our city parks or any of our properties that we do permit out, we do it on a very equitable basis. We've never kicked out one entity we've never canceled one permit because of another group. Walnut Park, for instance, majority of the permits are university specific, but they are not 100% university specific. It's basically just who is the organization or individual requesting the permit. We get students come in all the time to Thornton Park just to do classroom work, but they're not necessarily occupying a shelter, the pavilion or the amphitheater. But just as a whole, we work on an equitable basis. We don't kick out one entity because we feel or we judge one to be more important than the other. Parks are for all. So that's the way that we operate.
I have a question. Even though this is a maintenance agreement, would the university actually enforce the 2-hour parking limit in front of the Rose Garden? We cannot even go to the Rose Garden because there's no parking, because students are parking there all the time.
I can attest to the fact that, we can always obviously increase enforcement, but one of the most regular arguments I get into with my husband is him parking overtime in Thornton Park and getting a ticket. So I can certainly attest to the fact that we do ticket people who park overtime in Thornton Park. Julie, I don't know if you want to talk specifically. Obviously we can always increase enforcement, but I certainly know parking tickets are being written. Julie, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I can speak to that. And actually, I just, in hindsight, want to continue on Councilor Caldwell's question really quick. So if you want to call them grandfather groups, and meaning like the Thornton Park Association Chili Bowl or our Pop Warner groups, Shakespeare in the Park, those type of groups, same thing we do with like Kirk Park or Norwood Park. Those people have regular permits that last throughout their length of time. Those I will say we do rate those higher because they're year to year. They don't ever stop. It is basically they have a permit that goes year to year. So, and those are our neighborhood groups, our neighborhood children, our neighborhood association, our park association. So I just want to make sure that I clarify that part. When I say the equitable basis, that's any new permit permit request that's coming in. But as far as the parking, that is a police enforcement. The city doesn't have park police. As much as I would love to say that we do, like the county parks does, we don't have park police. So it's sort of outside the parks jurisdiction. With that said, though, we haven't turned a blind eye. We have been working the last few years, I want to say trial and error, almost working with those 2-hour signs. We've changed the parking rules within the park to try to adjust, to try to make improvements. But it would take more than just the Parks Department to have any impact.
So I
I
just
have
want
a
to,
couple of questions.
yeah, and just to jump back in, and the main thing, well, just for anyone that joined late, right now we're having the counselors ask questions, and then when that period is over, we'll open up for public comment. So Councilor Majek, go ahead.
Commissioner, a couple question for you.
Can you clarify which commissioner? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's you, Commissioner LaFave. With us wanting to do this with SU, is our interest based on the lack of capacity, and giving this to SU may have the capacity? What's the interest for us here?
So I want to make sure that we don't use words like giving away anything, because that's not.
No,
That's not
and I'm sorry, I'm not saying giving it away. I mean, what I mean by that is the maintenance. You know, giving the maintenance to SU, or have SU take care of it. Is it from the city side? Is it a capacity issue?
So again, I want to just say that we're not giving maintenance away. I've seen comments about where will they start mowing and where will we end mowing. We're not changing any mowing contracts. We're not changing anything. We're not giving any maintenance away. Even I understand that you're not saying that we're giving the parkway, but we're not even giving maintenance away. These are additional quests, just like Thornton Park Association, just like Strathmore Association, just like Kirk Park. They may come to us and just say, hey, you know what, we'd like to weed here. We'd like to cut back the weeds growing through the fence. From my end, the Parks Department manages over 1,000 acres in the city. That's a huge number. Apples in other municipalities, you should have, there's a statistic for one, each employee should be only managing a few acres. The Parks Department is stretched so much that for every one employee, they're managing the amount of sizes of a few football fields. And so we are stretched thin. I mean, Thornton Park is one of many gems in the city. We have gems all over the place. So if I will say from my end that if we have somebody who will offer assistance, not that we're giving away maintenance, but if somebody wants to come in and offer to do, and again, maintenance, not capital. If somebody wants to assist in doing some maintenance, I personally feel then we can dedicate some of our stretched thin staff to other parks that may not have park associations. I mean, it really benefits us. Just like Thornton Park Association, all the work, the wonderful work they do in the park benefits all. If Syracuse can help us, again, I use an example of our fencing around basketball courts and tennis courts. It's one of my least favorite things in most of the parks because our staff are stretched so thin that what was once a weed is now becoming a tree growing through our fences. If SU can hire a professional to help us trim that back, I see that as only a benefit to everybody. And it's a maintenance part.
And Commissioner, for me asking this, I'm not diminishing the generosity of SU here. I'm one of the people that appreciate SU for what they do for our community, certainly. But this leaves me with this question. I'm wondering, have we ever thought of quantifying this effort that SU is going to do for the maintenance for our park, and be able to turn that and have our youth take care of it, instead of going to the direction where SU want to help with the maintenance directly? Have we looked into quantifying that monetarily and have it so that we don't do this? Because as I see, so many people are uncomfortable with it, and I understand and appreciate the generosity of SU. Have we ever thought of that?
I think in order to quantify it, you have to give a chance. We have to start. I mean, how do you quantify something that hasn't happened yet? So I think that's a great question. I mean, you can quantify volunteer hours. The average value of volunteer hour is 28.53. I think it is I don't know why I'm so exact. I just looked it up last week, but we could certainly quantify, because again, SU is not just going to have free reign to just go in the park and cut back our fencing, right? They have to do it by a permit every single instance. I mean, we're making this it's very spelled out. So every single instance they want to perform some kind of maintenance, they're going to have to fill out a permit. So if we met a year from now, I could quantify that, because I would have a permit, an approved permit for everyone that we approve, and then we can quantify how many hours. Was it professional services that required somebody with specific licensing or certifications, or was this work that a volunteer could do? So we could quantify it. So we can't quantify yet because we don't know yet. We haven't approved anything, right? But a year from now, I think we could absolutely quantify it.
And I'm
You have
asking,
Walnut Park data though. Can you quantify the Walnut Park data from 2016 to 2021? Someplace to start. Sorry,
They
Councilor
haven't,
Middleton.
so they installed sidewalks in Walnut Park since then, but the Parks Department mows it, and if they're providing security, that's never been laid out. So I don't have any method to quantify because there's never been, it wasn't required like this for a permit.
now, Commissioner, I'm going to go a little bit further with that. You know, we have been doing maintenance at the park. I'm sure we know the personnel cost that it takes to do this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be appreciating what ASHU is offering, because we know how much goes into it, right? Doing it. And if ASHU can step in and help us with it, that I from my understanding, this is why we are doing this, because ASHU can help us with the capacity, right? So with that, wouldn't that mean that because we had personnel doing it all these years, couldn't there be a data anywhere that show those numbers?
Okay, so we have to think right now, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but unfortunately, the Parks Department is operating at a bare minimum. We do the bare minimum of maintenance because that's all we are able to do. So, and we also, since the pandemic, actually, we have started to track where our staff goes, where they are spending their time. Unfortunately, because we have over 1,000 acres, and you look at any nice summer weekend, unfortunately, majority of those hours are just spent picking up the garbage from the weekend before in any park. Or if we had a windstorm last night, we're spending the next 2 days with the garbage everywhere. So I can tell you how many hours the parks staff spends in Thorndon Park, but it doesn't really, it's just doing the bare minimum. So if we can, I will say, even with the Thorndon Park Association, you know, they do track their hours, but those are, it's weeding the lily pond and it's doing all those beautiful things, and the Rose Society does too. But I imagine any request that SU gives to us is going to be work that we're not performing because we haven't been able to have it within our bandwidth. So I'm not trying to not answer your question, but I can tell you the value of the time our staff is doing the bare minimum, prepping for the weekend rentals, picking up trash, or prepping the pool to be open. But it's all these extras that we're just not capable of doing. I don't know if that answered it, but it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay. And I think, Commissioner, would make sense as we, you know, because what I'm seeing here, where we want SU to help, we, as you said, we are operating at minimum staffing, and until we know how much work is needed, we wouldn't know what benefit this would do for us. That's one. Number two, we are also dealing with community members saying that we don't want this to happen because we can do this ourselves, right? But until we produce that data to be able to tell the community, okay, TPA, you have been doing your part, the city has been doing its part, but here's the gap where city can't make it up, and here's where SU should step in. I think it would be more clearer in that sense. So I would love to see that data. Second question, and Council Green, I will allow other councilors to come in. Corey, what's the cost of the two officers? Normally, the two officers that we are assigning to do patrolling for the community policing.
Michael, do you have? I mean, we can get that.
Yeah, so we can get that to you, Council. I don't have that. I just if I could just add one more point to the discussion around, you know, the value of volunteer hours and paying for it rather than doing it. I will say, you know, when we do you know, when we do adopt a block or we do cleanups where corporate groups want to help out, there's never a time when we say, hey, we don't want your labor. we want you to give us a cash donation instead, so that we can go ahead and do that labor. So this would be a unique situation where we say, oh no, we don't want your assistance. We only want the money part of it. So that would be a change of precedent. So I just want to be real clear about, what we're looking at right here, because right now what we're talking about is a group that is coming in the way that other groups do and saying, we have capacity to assist, we'd like to assist. And so for us to say, well, no, we don't want that, would be a new approach for us. So I just want to make that comparison. That's all.
And Counselor, we can get you those figures on the cost for the officers, what the estimated cost would be. We can get that to you in short order.
Okay, and I brought that point up, Commissioner Collins, because I think this may be an opportunity for SU to continue to invest in our youth, because the trimming and all of that, over the summer, the youth and the young adult could certainly be engaged. And I think there is a room for opportunity here. I agree. There's a room for opportunity to engage our young adults and the youth over summer to do some work. So I would be interested to further that conversation.
Sure, understood. And Onondaga Earth Corps is a great example of where youth are employed to do some of this work within the parks. So we that does currently happen and create job opportunities for youth. So we love that idea so much. We actively do it.
Judy, I have a question going back to what Commissioner Caldwell was saying before. From the premise that I do think this is a great opportunity for the city and a great collaboration with SU. However, she made a point that this is something that I'm sure we're all getting the million emails, and we're all getting the same emails of concerns. And just to take that a little step further, last night I was reading some remarks somebody was sending out, and their concern is not that they can't not apply to use the parks. It's that at least the way I interpreted it, is that, for instance, SU may come to parks and then lock a number of weeks, dates, whatever it is they do, and so they're already locked in. And if somebody else would like to use the park, they couldn't, because those dates are locked in for SU, and what they were saying is that the events may or may not happen, but they were already locked in and nobody else could use them if the events are not going to happen. So is that something you can talk about a little bit to ease everybody's pain?
So I want to say that, I've limited my reading of the online comments. I have. I've seen a lot of these what ifs, and to me, this is not any scenario that has ever happened. I mean, SU, I think it's broad to say SU gets permits. I mean, we have Greek organizations, educational societies, whoever, they on an individual basis, while affiliated with SU, might ask for a permit, but it's a single occurrence, a single instance. We've never had an instance where somebody requests, other than we're talking like Pop Warners or youth leagues, football, baseball, which is not SU affiliated at all. Those are the only people that we ever grant permits to that are recurring on a long-term basis, because, they're teams, they're leagues, there's playing, there's scrimmaging. We've never, and then the only other recurring one would be something like a Shakespeare in the Park, who, they have performances every weekend or for 1 week straight. But we have never had an instance, and I'm not just talking Thornton Park, but we've never had an instance in any of our parks where somebody comes and just says, I want to just have a blanket permit of the pavilion every single Saturday at noon. It's not anything that's happened. And if we somehow got that request, there'd be a fee for every single instance. And if the Parks Department makes preparations, we assume everything is going to happen. If there was some kind of instance like that where somebody requested our pavilion every Saturday and we send out staff on OT to go prep that pavilion, and we see that the first 2 Saturdays they're not there, then we would make the phone call and say, I'm sorry, you're not there. We need to revisit this. But again, these are all those what if scenarios. It's not a scenario that's ever happened.
Well, and just to build off of what the commissioner is saying, that could happen now. if SU wanted to reserve the park, like the service agreement doesn't impact SU's ability or anybody's ability to reserve the park. It hasn't happened yet. SU has not come to the Parks Department to say, we want Thornton Park all day, every inch of it. They could if they wanted to, but they don't. And this service agreement doesn't make it any more likely that they're going to. It just doesn't. And the Thornton Park and the Parks Department balances a lot of the community groups. We have a lot of, outside of Thornton Park, Burnett Park, areas that have turf that are in high demand. And Julie's department, I think, does a great job of balancing community needs and giving priority to those organizations that we have longstanding agreements with, that they have for years held events there. And so, the fact that all of a sudden SU is going to come forward and reserve the amphitheater to make Shakespeare in the Park go to Schiller is just, SU hasn't done that now, hasn't done that. There's no reason for them to do that. And this agreement doesn't make it any more likely for them to do that. It doesn't give them any special access that they don't have now. It doesn't give them any preferential treatment for us to weigh their permits over other people's permits. It doesn't impact SU's ability to reserve the park. It has nothing to do with it.
But on
The
that
language
note,
actually,
though,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, the language actually says that they have the right in the same fashion as anybody else. That's not the exact language, but it basically just says they have the right the same as anybody else has the right.
And for what it's worth, that was one of the concerns that the Thornton Park Association brought to us, that there was some language in there that, I think we kind of thought, well, this is just the whereas preambles that go into every legal document that, that the SU and their staff and students enjoy full access to the park, but it was construed that somehow SU would have special access to the park more than others. So we took that out. I mean, that was never the intention. That was never going to be what happened. But if that language made people uncomfortable, SU agreed, the city requested, and SU agreed to take that out. So there is nothing in this agreement that speaks to SU getting any access to the park more or in a preferential treatment than anybody else who wants access to the park. And if SU hasn't reserved Thornton Park to exclude every organization, if they haven't done that so far, I don't know why they would do it now. That's not their intention. That's never been part of the conversation. And this agreement doesn't make it any more likely that that's going to happen.
To go back to what Councilor Majoke had said about educating the community on those points that you're making, Commissioner LaFave and Commissioner Dunham, that's so important. So either the council needs to step up their game and get better at communicating with their constituents or maybe the city needs to start doing a series of press releases to this point, because this is a concern that unfortunately, Commissioner LaFave, us councilors cannot just not read the comments. We get daily communication from our constituents. They are concerned. They are raising families in this city. They are struggling like the rest of us. They are helping their neighbors bring their garbage cans in and help with landscaping like the rest of us. So I just feel like we need to really give the time to this concern that the community has, regardless of the fact that the city officials understand that this park is not being taken over by Syracuse University. The community feels that it is. So we need to do our part and educate them. I don't know who else was trying to speak.
I would just say, if people have been told things repeatedly time and they say, I don't believe you, then it's not a matter of education. It's a matter of people saying they don't believe you and they don't trust you, which I don't know. So to that point, I'm just saying, like, it's not like we haven't done TNT meetings. It's not like we haven't done meetings with the community. People have gotten the information. Those same people are saying, I don't believe the information you're giving me and I reject it. So we had the same, I compare this scenario to the same thing we had with 5G. We had, the only community outreach we had was from people who said, you're going to kill my child with 5G. And we went through research, studying the science, studying the data, getting federal reports, getting federal commissioners to give us feedback to see if this was a legitimate concern or not. And people still filled the council chambers and refused to believe us.
We need to find a better way to educate them and get their validation that the information that the city is giving is being understood. Because clearly, Councilor Driscoll, I'm with you on that. If they're just rejecting it, then that is on them. But I really feel that there is some serious uncertainty on the information.
There's a lot of misinformation out there and people choose to believe what they want to believe. I agree with you, Joe. I think that outreach, reaching better in the community to bring this information it's the best policy is always good communication. I think we should then kind of come out in the community and bring this information as we're speaking of it right now.
So, I mean, I feel like we tried to do a balance of not just expecting people to come to us, to come to a committee meeting, but also we went to them. We reached out to the stakeholders that use Thornton Park on a regular basis. We went to Thornton Park Association meetings. We went to TNT meetings. We issued press releases. So obviously, to your point, Councilor Schultz, if I knew how to reach every resident that, we wanted to know, we wanted to be sure of information, I'd probably be in a much different position than I am right now. Everybody would understand sidewalks and, and all the other initiatives that we're pursuing. But, for what it's worth, and we did attempt to not only make people come to us by attending council study sessions or attending committee meetings, but we also tried to bring the message and information to folks, to the stakeholders that we thought would be interested in finding out the details. And I think that is demonstrated by the feedback that we received from the Thornton Park Association and the back and forth we had with them about the concerns that they had, the way in which they were incorporated into the revised agreement, the response that we got from Thornton Park after they reviewed the revised agreement. So I do think that no doubt there's always more that we can do, but I do believe that we did make some genuine efforts to bring the message to folks and not just expect them to come to us.
Can I
weigh in, excuse me, Councilor Schultz, if I could just weigh in here, I'm just going to rely on the 5 years that I spent with the City Parks Department. And I want to commend Commissioner Lefebvre and the way she's worked with the traditionally most understaffed and underfunded department in the city. This situation is no different than any other situation, any other use of any park in my history with the Parks Department. We have worked with neighborhood organizations, athletic organizations. We have welcomed help from all sorts of community groups for years. I specifically remember the late great Bob Southworth, who coached Corcoran High School for about 45 years. Even coach had the unfortunate task of coaching me at one point. Mowing the lawn at Van Dyne Field. I mean, these informal and formal arrangements have been part of the history of the Parks Department because simply the Parks Department has always been underfunded and understaffed, and that's just the way it is. So I would welcome Syracuse University to get involved with maybe Skiddy Park too, or a few parks on the West End if they wanted to. But any type of organization that is concerned about community that wants to get involved in the parks, I don't see any problem with this at all. We're not giving up the sovereignty of the parks. They still will have to get a permit from the Parks Commissioner. To me, this is a tempest in the teapot. That's all there is to it. Thank you very much.
If I could share my questions, I also second that applause for Commissioner Lefebvre and Commissioner Dunham and Collins for all of their work on this. This is not an easy thing. And each piece and part of it has its own unique significance that, again, I cannot stress enough that I don't feel like this agreement should be packed this full with all of these details, because I feel like we're missing the attention that they all need. And we're also maybe getting some information confused and disseminating information to the community not in the best way possible. So having listened to the mayor's address last night, I could not help but leave excited and hopeful for better days ahead for Syracuse. I look at this agreement that started in 1994, which I think is great that Syracuse stepped up and wanted to help us way back then. But we are in the year 2022, the 21st century. This agreement belongs back in 1994. It has been tacked on and jammed in with other details that I just feel is unwieldy and needs to be completely revised. Also heard the mayor last night say that we have $60 million in our fund balance that will go untouched this year. So I think we really should, or 80 million, I'm sorry. We should pay attention to that and the fact that we have this ARPA cushion now and potentially take this opportunity, tacking onto what Commissioner Collins said about changing the precedent. Let's change this precedent. Let's take this agreement. Let's say, thank you very much, but time to retire. Let's potentially create a pilot agreement that we spell out some of these things, but ultimately at the end, out of the kindness of their heart, they give us money for us to do what we're good at doing. The city is well versed with amazing heads like Commissioner LaFave who have the capability to do this. We just need a little more funding. She's made that very clear. So let's ask Syracuse University to give us some of those funds. As we see buildings like the Marshall falling off the tax rolls, I don't know how many millions we're losing in property tax on that, but I think this $11 million over 5 years pales in comparison to what we're actually losing. In addition to that, this meeting book that we have to legally have in front of us for our Monday's meeting, in my opinion, is incomplete. I go back to the December meeting that you had, and there were Exhibit B and the maps, and Councilor Hogan asked at the last meeting, where is Exhibit B? We can't find it. So is it possible that we can get this book to reflect truly all of the exhibits and attachments? Because again, we've got 3 new counselors who were not part of this process back in June, and I can't make sense of what was taken out, what was added, because all I have now is the one addendum from the mayor's office and the agreement. So I'm unprepared as far as that meeting book goes. And also yesterday I attended, along with Councilor Driscoll and Councilor Caldwell, the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board meeting. And a new fact I learned yesterday is that Thorndon Park is actually locally designated historic park. And I think I heard Commissioner LaFave say today that Walnut is also. So the fact that we don't have that mentioned in this agreement, that's considerable information that we're leaving out. As we all know here in the city, that the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board has a really rigorous process to make any changes to the park. So our counterpart, SU, who wants to goodness of their heart help us with the weeding, they need to be versed in that. So we need to send them the documentation of what it takes to actually maintain a historic park. So let's pay some attention to that. Also, we have the Parks Conservancy, which I'm sure Commissioner LaFave could go on at a whole nother meeting about what that is. I think it's a fabulous group. I think actually the budget this year, we're going to be asking for more money to support them. So how do we get them involved with this? Maybe even ask SU to talk to Parks Conservancy to help with that, or the Adopt a Park program. But to specifically create an agreement for SU to have their hands on weeding and trimming, I think is excessive. And that might be the part that makes the community upset, is why do they get an agreement and we don't? Yes, they've got $11 million. And as we know, money talks, but I think it's unfair. Also, jumping ahead, I'm trying to squeeze this on before the meeting ends. The CSOs, I know somebody here today said that they were going to get back to Councilor Majota, I believe it was, with the details on what that costs, but I'm still unclear as to whether they're asking for $125,000 for 2 new CSOs, or if that's going to help support the 2 CSOs they already have assigned to Shine and Hildegard. So I'm still waiting for clarity on all of that. And those are not uniformed police officers that are staffing Shine and Hildegard. But I think the terms in the agreement say uniformed, what's the wording? Sworn, non-probationary from the city police department to act as CSOs. So again, I need help with that language to understand if they're gun carrying police officers or if they're CSOs. And also on that note, are we hiring brand new CSOs, or are we tapping into the CSOs that we already have employed at the city? In which case, what departments are going to suffer from losing those 2 positions? I know I'm throwing a lot of questions out at you right now, but maybe we can all just get back and follow up with the details. And lastly, the crosswalks word regardless is still very confusing and misrepresentative of really what's going on. So I really implore you to make yet another edit to that language, because I don't think that it's fair that us counselors have to sign or approve an agreement that's just really riddled with lots of faults. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Counselor.
And I can write out my questions if you want and send them all to the commissioners here to get the answers.
One, just
Commissioner
procedural question,
LaFave,
Counselor. We get supplemental agendas for the Monday meeting. So all the exhibits you're talking about, that's how it works, is we'll get a new agenda on Monday that'll include all those exhibits. And it'll be the same thing that we got in the email, right, Corey, that you'd sent over. So what you got in the email, we'll get a supplemental agenda and it comes in on Monday.
Okay, so I can expect that from individual people, or does that come from the clerk's office?
The city clerk will send it.
Okay, thanks.
Other counselors that have questions?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up with Commissioner LaFave. Do we know if TPA has capacity either to do this at all?
sometimes the maintenance we're talking about require heavy machinery and heavy equipment. I mean, you know, if we're talking about removing a tree that obviously the arborist weighs in on, or if it might be a dead tree, I mean, that's not work that volunteers can do. So I think we need to be aware that not all volunteer work is just something that can be done by either a youth or somebody who's untrained on how to use a chainsaw or, you know, loppers or anything like that. So, I can't speak for TPA, but I mean, every scenario, every maintenance scenario is different. Even,
Okay.
yep.
And also maybe I'm not, I gotta read closely, but do we know if TPA get funding from all of this money at all?
They've received support in the past from Unsac.
Okay, how much?
I mean, you know, I could go through, well, I see that Kate Atwater's on here from Thornton Park Association. I know that they've received support through the Unsac process in the past. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we could get historically how much has been provided, you know, to all the neighborhood associations through the Unsac process. I don't know, Kate, if you have that information handy.
We could certainly get that information. And so today, at this very moment, I'm wearing my TPA hat. We could certainly get that information to you, but Counselor, it is usually project specific. The latest project, for example, was lighting up the entrance gates,
Okay.
which we did in coordination with the city in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and with that, in addition to the suggestion I made earlier, you know, I'm wondering if you know, with TPA being around and giving in and you know, sending in proposals to be funded to do work, I'm wondering if this is something that in the past, what project and what they had proposed for, and if this could be something within their capacity that they would look for, and how much, and would the contract in itself would want to fund something like that. I would be interested to know all those questions.
Councilor Majok, what I can say is, you know, it's a application process. District councilors are included in the committee that makes those decisions. Really, the Westcott Community Center and University Neighborhood Preservation are traditionally the largest funded organizations that, frankly, because of the fact that they've had to go without being able to apply for this money right now, timing of this is important to those organizations. They turn around and put this money out into the neighborhoods as is required by the agreement. And what we hear from the neighbors is they are effective in doing so. So we expect that they'll be applying again.
If I could just say that the TPA works with volunteer groups throughout the spring and summer and fall. We do not currently have the capacity to actually be able to manage an ongoing maintenance program, because really what we're trying to do is not just that, you know, the 11 acres that is delineated in that map, but really throughout the park, working on projects. So the park, just as Commissioner Lefebvre has said, it does need more maintenance. TPA does what it can, and it works very closely with SU students, sororities, different volunteer groups, and so forth. But TPA would not have the capacity to be able to manage an ongoing maintenance program such as you're suggesting.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councilor Cho made a great suggestion regarding supporting the youth with this project. I know we are at like the last hour and councilors have been working on this for years and commissioners for months. I totally respect that. But with the new councilors coming, a couple questions. Do you think SU would be willing in the city, coming together with this project to adding the youth program to help support this initiative? If it's about coming together and showing that we're working together. So would that be something that we could add to saying a part of this agreement? We are going to connect you with one of the youth organizations, and they're going to be a part of helping support cleanup in this, area, learning how to use whatever technicals, lawnmowers, whatever need to be. And also, whose idea, just a thought, and it came into an email from me, whose idea was it to have SU do the maintenance, or was it ours because of lack of, we didn't have enough staffing to that? Was that an SU thing, or was that a city Syracuse idea?
So Councilor, let me speak to the first question, or the first point about the youth. So much of, when you look at this document, you've seen, the fact that there's a lot of things that are addressed in it. The focus, obviously, right now has been on Thornton Park. Within Unsac, so Dunbar Association also has been a successful awardee, because the campus is not bordered only on, doesn't just have a border on the Westcott side of it. Westcott, and Westcott Community Center as well. There has long been and continues to be the ability for organizations in the neighborhoods that are around SU to be able to apply for and receive funding that's specific to whatever benefits that area, and that includes youth. So that exists in this current document and has existed since Unsac was created. So that's there, and it's great, and we love it. As far as the university, so going back to what Corey put out at the beginning of the presentation, when this was introduced in this current the version that just expired in 2016, it was discussed then that the ability to have SU expand their the way that they share their capacity within the neighborhood into Thornton was thought of back then. So this is a continuation of that discussion. To Commissioner LaFave's point, we are grateful for every organization that is willing to assist in keeping our city beautiful.
Thank you.
Any other
Michael?
questions from councilors?
I was going to say, Michael, if no other councilors have any question, maybe we should open up.
Sure. So anyone that would like to say anything, please put your name in the chat function, and then Jim will have you MC it. And please keep your comments to 2 minutes. So Jim, has there been anyone so far that's put their name in that'd like to speak? I don't know if Jim's available, but I've seen.
Sorry about that. Right now, whoops. Oh. Sorry, Counselor. No, right now, no one has, except Jen Royal just wrote her name down, so I assume that means she wants to speak. So Jen.
And Heather Schroeder after her as well. Those two names have come up in the chat.
Okay.
We're not able to hear you at the moment.
Sorry, it took me a minute. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak. My name is Joan Royal, and I'm the Executive Director of the Westcott Community Center. And I fully thank the council for all of this thoughtful conversation and thinking about the effects that this agreement has on the park and has on the community at large. And I want to tell you a little bit about what it means to the Westcott Community Center. We serve over 3,000 individuals in the east side of the city of Syracuse. The Unsac agreement is something that has traditionally given us funding for overall operating costs to help the folks in our community. The services are basic needs pantries, older adult services, and to fill the gaps in grants that we have many, because funders typically give for very specific programming. Unsac allows us to fill all of those gaps and to help with operating costs. So since this agreement has been delayed, if we were to have been funded, we're down about $57,000 right now that we're carrying these costs and that we don't have other funding for. Unsac typically funds Westcott for about $105,000 to $110,000 a year. And we truly are desperate for these funds. COVID has been difficult for the center, difficult for our community, and we are working on basic needs and helping older adults. We service over 500 older adults on the east side of the city of Syracuse. And right now we're doing deliveries, which is not something we're funded for because it's a different model of service. I'm urging the council to pass this agreement because we desperately need this funding. We will be laying off staff, at least 3 if we don't get this funding. So that means we will be cutting back programs and services. And I'm asking you to think about this part of the agreement that is really critical to the work we do in the community. That's it.
Thank you. Heather Schroeder.
Thank you, councilors and commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the discussion. I'm the president of the University Neighborhood Preservation Association, known as UNPA. We are the other large recipient of Unsac funding. What's very clear to me in looking at the presentation today is that our funding is not increasing. Not only are we without funding since July 1st, when our fiscal year began, but what's proposed for the neighborhood groups is a flat rate over 5 years. And those funds are crucial to us. It's something that we cannot function without. But I am aware of the fact that while the other 2 components of the agreement, the financial support for city services and the financial support for, the support for city parks, are contentious parts of the agreement. Unsac remains unchanged. There's nothing controversial about Unsac other than that we're not getting any more funding than we normally do. One thing I've often questioned is why the $125,000 for the Syracuse Police Department is excised from our funding. We the community groups never get the full $500,000 because $125,000 is taken off the top for SPD, which is a city service, not a neighborhood organization. So that is something that in future agreements perhaps we can take a look at. But as Joan mentioned, we've kind of missed our window to make big amendments. We're 6 months now without funding, and I guess we appreciate your support to proceed with Unsac funding, whatever that means, whether that means severing it from other parts of the agreement or voting on the agreement next week. But we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Roth.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much for allowing me to comment. I'm a board member of the Walnut Park Association, and I just wanted to clarify certain points that we've talked about today, and it's really been a pleasure to be part of this meeting. We basically have presented the point that we just don't understand why any city park has to be part of this services agreement. We really feel this should be severed. We welcome SU's interest in the city parks and its offer of assistance, but we don't believe that the city park should be placed in a larger services agreement, which then also impacts Westcott Community Center, UNPA, and other neighborhood groups who benefit from the Unsac monies. And that we've talked about that since October, and yet SU has been a hard no on separating the agreement. So we just don't understand that. I would like the council to take a look at that, actually. The map also remains troubling. The 11-acre portion of the park is of specific interest to SU, and I don't believe it, and we don't understand exactly why they want that particular, other than the fact that it is their eastern border. And in the Syracuse framework, they talk about moving east and moving south. So it hasn't been helpful that SU has not really sat down and talked to the stakeholders in the East Side community. What we are concerned about is by delineating and codifying a specific area of the park, this agreement actually provides Syracuse University with a proprietary foothold in the park. And that is of a concern to the East Side community. And this probably is not the intention. I mean, I hear that the administration said this is not our intention, but agreements outlive administrations. And to ensure that the scenario never happens, that there's a proprietary foothold in the park, the park should never be included in future services and support agreements. So I think if we can separate the services agreement from the parks agreement, or the offer of SU to provide assistance to the Parks Department, TPA has had a very good relationship with the Parks Department, and we do understand that they're short-staffed and they need help. But I think we need to look at a different method of funding. I think that Ms. Schultz's idea that maybe we need to move into the 21st century and create new agreements which don't impact one community group against another would be very, very helpful at this point in time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Maribel.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Maribel Arce. I'm the Executive Director of UNPA, but I also work with Westcott Community Center as the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Syracuse Community Center Collaborative. So, and I want to just let the new council members know that Unsac, the delay of the Unsac agreement being approved, is not only affecting Westcott Community Center and UNPA. This grant helps us support initiatives that help the Southwest side and also to help Outer Comstock. And some of the services provided by these agreements will end. We are right now at UNPA not being able to fund activities for already 6 months. We had a little bit stashed away some money to continue. We don't have more funding. And Westcott Community Center provides really emergency services to a lot of the neighbors. And although there is the perception that in the east side of our neighborhood, it's, we're middle class, there's a lot of poverty in our neighborhood. There's a lot of neighbors that need that support. There's food pantry services. There's seniors that have been completely isolated. And what Westcott Community Center does is really critical. So as these, perhaps the ideal would be to really reformat this agreement. That would be great. But we need you to understand, it's already been 7 months. And if it took 7 months to get where we are now, where even Thornton Park Association says they're okay with what is here, it would be ideal for it to be separated. That we agree with that. It would be ideal if Unsac stays Unsac the way it used to be, and then all these other shared services and additional money and park things and police things would be severed from it, because Unsac was initially planned for just neighborhood associations. So if whatever you choose to do, just consider that stalling is really not that much of an option at this point. So thank you.
Jim, was there anyone else?
Councilor Green, that looks like everyone at this point.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And just one thing I do want to clarify, because I know we've gotten some emails on this, asking the council to strike Thornton Park from it. And just to clarify, under the city charter, the administration enters into agreements and the council can vote. The council can vote yes or no. We don't have the ability to unilaterally change the agreement. So just so everyone's clear on that, we can request the administration to change it, which is something we've done. We've asked them to take out Thornton Park, but we don't have the ability to do that on our own. We have to vote yes or no. Yep.
As a new counselor, are those the only two options? Yes and no?
We could hold it, which is what we've done since October. Yes, no, or hold.
Is there an object? What does that mean?
A counselor can object to the legislation, and then that counselor becomes the sponsor of the legislation at that point. And the following meeting, it becomes a vote.
Same thing happens.
Okay, so there's 4 options then. Yes, no, postpone, and object. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Well, anyway, I appreciate everyone's time and consideration on this, and we will call this meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.